Testing English channel. Good morning. Testing English channel.
Translation into English. Translation English.
Muy buenos días a todos, muy bienvenidos.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to everyone joining this session. It is a joy to see you once again in this 13th meeting of Vital Voices Southern Cone. Today, we're going to discuss more topics. When we started focusing on our biases, we we focused on gender, and today we are going to invite you to take a further step towards inclusion, diversity, and to find out what intersectionality is about. That will be the focus of today's conference. Feel at ease because we will have a morning to learn, to get inspiration, and to start taking action. We would like to encourage you to be the stars of this conference, so we encourage you to join the social media. Tell us where you come from what cities you're joining this Vital Voices Southern Cone meeting. You can see the QR code on the screen. Just take your cell phone, you capture the QR, and you can tell us where you're joining us this morning from to this Latin American conference that we are inviting you to. Not just Latin American, because you will see that many other people will be joining us to reflect together this morning. It is a joy to be here with you. My name is Martina Rua. I'm a journalist. I specialize in innovation. And last year we discussed bias and gender. Today, our proposal is to discuss intersectionality, how we can continue to grow in our different identities. So while we move on and while we hear you, we encourage you to use social media to hear what resonates from today's conference. Voces Vitales are on all social media. We will also use hashtag Jornada Anual VVA, and you can also use hashtag Género, interseccionalidad, among others, to be able to hear your voices through the social media. Would you like to find out what the agenda is about so that you start getting excited together with us? We will have different speakers from all the region and from the entire world. We will have Alice Nelson, Margaret Goldenberg, Nicolaus Dimitriadis,
Wade, Adam Travis,
Tanya Glandis, Tracy Wade, Adam Travis, Christy Russell, Greta Gonzalez, among many other speakers. It is important to thank all the companies that have made this possible. So thank you. I'd like to thank the sponsors, Logitech, NewTek, Oracle, and Red Hat for supporting us. We would also like to thank Uber, BMS, Intel, Pharmacity, Group Renault, Avon, Savant, and the media partner who are joining us as every year, Porter, Nobelli, Doppler, and Global News, who are also here with us today. As I told you a moment ago, today we will talk about intersectionality. I don't know where you knew where this term comes from, but it comes from the Black feminist movement with the scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. And then this moved towards a much broader inclusion concept. Today, we will see what it has to do with us. So stay tuned because we will need you on the other side of the screen for you to be the stars of this morning's conference. I would like to invite Maria Laura Faria, who's the president of Vital Voices Southern Cone, for her to welcome you all. Hello, good morning, how are you? Good morning, my name is Maria Laura Farias. I'm the president of Vital Voices Southern Cone. I'd like to welcome everyone from Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, and other parts of the world who trust in Vital Voices and who have come to share this incredible conference with us. Vital Voices Southern Cone is part of a global network which is present in 184 countries to identify, train, and empower emerging leading women around the world. In Southern Cone, we actively work with programs in Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay. Our focus, our actions on three axes: personal leadership, economic empowerment, and network creation. The annual conference is a space of reflection where the voices of leaders get together to contribute to foster avant-garde topics in order to inspire conversations that make it possible for us to evolve. Today is our 13th annual conference, and we will focus on gender and intersectionality in order to arise conversations. Intersectionality makes it possible to understand how identities, social, economic, and cultural identities among other general characteristics of people, gender, social class, sexual orientation, religion, among others, overlap and interact among each other. We believe that intersectionality is a key concept for gender equality, to position the rights of women throughout the world, because that makes it possible for us to better understand how different social identities shape the life experiences of women and how they interact with gender. This is important because this is how we can make visible what is invisible. Vital Voices Southern Cone knows that for change to be real, we need more leaders with this awareness, more leaders who are committed and who actively work to make visible what's invisible. And it is important for these leaders, once they manage to understand, can generate an impact in community. We encourage you to be part of this change. We trust that each one of you can have a positive impact in your community and that we need to move forward together. It's been shown that the individual impact is very important, but the ability to move as a network is unprecedented. On behalf of all the people at Vital Voices Southern Cone, our sponsors, allies, and benefactors who support us every year, who enable us to evolve as an organization. Thank you for trusting us and for being part of this change. So thank you so much. With that, I wish you can enjoy this conference. Thank you, Maria Laura. I believe that your introduction of what's next has been great. Would you like to get to know more about intersectionality? To start, we have prepared a video and then we will introduce the speakers. What is intersectionality? We are all made up of different conditions and social, cultural, economic, and physical characteristics. These conditions define us.
O generar desigualdades según las miradas culturales.
But they can also lead to problems. The strategies to build equality tend to center on a single condition or characteristic such as gender, culture, economic situation, physical situation, or education. And we believe that by solving one condition, we solve the entire problem, whereas intersectionality encourages us to recognize the multiplicity of conditions and features that cut across a single person, so that there is a comprehensive approach. Intersectionality then recognizes that there are situations by themselves, but it also focuses on understanding how they change and the impact they may have when they combine. It tries to adjust the frameworks of actions undertaken by public and private sectors with the different forms of discrimination, particularly when they combine, broadening the frameworks of these solutions so that they can include a broader number of individual cases. We know that the track record of women is very different from each other. Let's make the deliberate effort to look, understand, and act, designing opportunities for each one of them. After this introduction, we are ready to welcome our first speaker. Let me introduce Margaret Goldenberg, who's the CEO of Goldenberg Diversidade, a strategic consulting firm on diversity and inclusion working with several companies. She's the executive director of the Mulher 360 movement, an organization that seeks to contribute to the economic empowerment of Brazilian women with a 360-degree view in order to disseminate the progress in business policies and practices and the commitment to the Brazilian business community. We will ask Margaret what it means to discuss intersectionality and why it's so important to talk about this in a world for greater equality. Welcome, Margaret. We are all ears. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I thank you for the opportunity to discuss this topic today. Intersectionality has been widely discussed here in Brazil and in Latin America. Why? Because for many years, when we used to discuss gender equality in organizations, we didn't used to include a view to all women. Overall, the focus was a general one without intersectional depth. And all of a sudden, without even realizing, we are talking about white and heterosexual women, because we white heterosexual women are the majority in this minority group of gender in the business world. And with the progress of the discussion, now we clearly understand that the different identity markers of a person, such as a race or ethnicity, generations, gender, overlap, shaping the identity of every individual. And as has already been said in the video, in the previous talk, intersectionality arose in 1989 with Kimberly Crenshaw. She's an African American woman, and she understood that identities do not boil down to just one factor, but there is an overlapping or an intersection of factors that result in a more holistic view of approach to the human being. The proposal is not a sum, but for people to think about the realities of every individual, understanding every individual, every person as a political and social being, understanding intersectionality of identities makes it possible for us to understand the complexities, discrimination systems overlap, creating complex intersections where 2 or 3 or 4 axes are cut across, thus leading to overlapping. This intersectional view allow us to capture the different ways of subordination, such as sexism, male chauvinism, racism, and patriarchalism. In recognizing this and intentionally,
para todas as mulheres, né? Nós sabemos que a trilha no mercado
we know that women are very different and women are not universal. The selection of women is frequently shaped by aspects that revolve around their identities. And we have information from different research studies indicating that lesbian, bisexual, or Black or disabled women are having different experiences, generally much worse, which lead women to a work market that is impaired and that prevents them from reaching leadership positions. They encounter more hurdles, they receive less support than other groups of women. In terms of salary, there is great disparity between men and women. There's also a difference in salaries between white and women and Black women. Here in Brazil, women make 20% less than men, even if they take the same roles. And white women make more than Black men. When we analyze the situation of Black women, the situation is even more worrying. They make less than half the salary of a white man. In 10 years, the killing of Black women increased, whereas in the case of white women, it went down. Black women have 3 more times chances of being victims of feminicide. There's been research of the Brazilian market, for example, 70% of the assessed companies follow similar policies for women. Only 28% of the companies have policies for non-white women, and only 23% for trans women and 14% for women older than 50 years of age. So we need to make an effort to understand and to design personalized policies for these women, understanding their inequalities and also looking at them with love a cultural change of attitudes and structures is required. Many times, lesbian, Black or trans women are not taken care of, and this reinforces the perpetuation of stereotypes. We can improve all the results. Not all of them have had the same experience in companies. There isn't a single approach. There should be individualized challenges. We need to identify opportunities to correct growing biases, growing discrimination, fight against stereotypes against Black and disabled women. We recommend some practices for this type of women for the Brazilian corporate market. Black and disabled women encounter more barriers and receive less support. Disabled women receive more discrimination on a daily basis, like when they are interrupted or their ideas are not taken care of. By disabled women or Black women receive negative comments about their selves. We have to bring down many stereotypes against this type of women and understand how this affects the different types of people. We want to double diversity in hiring by implementing strategies for hiring underrepresented groups, requiring lists of plural candidates and applicants. We need to support this with metrics based on gender and based on other markers. And we need to prioritize racial diversity, gender diversity, looking at their differences, policies and programs.
De todas as mulheres no mercado de trabalho são complexos e únicos.
These challenges of inclusion are complex and unique for each of these intersections, and they will not be overcome overnight. That's why we recommend regularity, joint working in the different areas of the company, other companies, like Mujeres 360 and Vital Voices. It's important to systematize in order to be able to act jointly, in order to involve the different sectors of civil society towards a commitment to long-term transformations. Finally, we have worked with our best assets, using our expertise, best knowledge, and energy, seeking equality of opportunities for all women. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias Margaret por tus palabras, muchas gracias por sumarte a este encuentro. Ha sido más que contundente poder.
Thank you, Margaret, for your remarks and for joining this event. It has been very enlightening. We know that there are people and stories behind those figures that you have shared, and we know that intersectionality also has to do with discrimination. There are different discrimination types that converge, and we have to be attentive to this. Now, as I was hearing Margaret talk, I was reflecting about cultural aspects, but also biological aspects. Are there any biological aspects to be able to answer this question? We will have the presentation of Nicolas Dimitriadis. He is a communication professional. He's a consultant. He has studied more than 6,500 brains from different countries for academic purposes, and he has focused on academia and leadership. He participates in leading or leadership programs around the world. He's also the president of the Institute for Innovation and Change Management in Geneva. Nikolaos, with this disruption, we have this question. What is failing in bias training in terms of gender? What can we do about it? It's a pleasure for us to have you here. I turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. It's such a pleasure and such an honor to be with you here today. I have many exciting things to share with you, which I hope will resonate with you and will help you improve and achieve the goals of the event that we have today. So if you allow me, I will immediately jump in the topic, because I really hope that we will have the time to cover all these wonderful and I hope helpful issues that I want to share with you today. So let's start immediately. Okay, ready? Let's do it. As maybe you've heard already, I was privileged and happy enough and lucky enough with my teams to have measured more than 7,000 brains around the world, more than 25 countries up to now. And also I'm very happy to have written and co-authored 2 books, Neuroscience for Leaders and Advanced Marketing Management. Many of the things that we will discuss today are actually covered within these books. So, is unconscious bias training working? Now, I have been informed that last year you had a very nice session, I guess on the 12th annual meeting and conference. You had a session about cognitive or unconscious or implicit biases, and that many people found this very insightful and very interesting in how it affects our decision making and our behaviors every day. So I thought that my contribution today would be, since we really understand and we really acknowledge globally now that biases, as I said, sometimes we call them cognitive, implicit, or unconscious biases. Most of these terms are not exactly the same, but most they refer to the same phenomenon. So since we all recognize and acknowledge that these biases, these shortcuts of decision making, actually push us to the wrong decision, to the wrong behavior, to discriminations, to even hate towards the other, should we do something about it? And I think it was also a global reaction to the question I just said, should we do something about it? The reaction was, yes, of course we have to do something about it. Now, the knee-jerk reaction of the world, especially the corporate world, the business world, okay, but not only, generally the organization world, could be business, could be non-business organizations, the knee-jerk reaction was, okay, let's develop training programs in order to inform and shape a new opinion, a new attitude towards people that will help them acknowledge, understand, spot the cognitive bias, and by spotting it, by bringing it on the surface, and by spotting it and recognizing it, then to work with this in order to work with yourself and others in order to minimize the impact and maybe even minimize the expression within you. Change, in a few words, change your mindset, the way that your brain works in order to minimize the negative impact of cognitive biases. So the whole world saw a huge supply of cognitive biases training. I think many organizations, maybe even yours, the one you work for, goes through cognitive biases training. So the big question now after this is, does it really work? And I have to tell you that regardless how popular still are such programs, the astounding answer around the world is that actually this type of intervention, this type of trying to train your cognition, the way that your brain reacts, processes the information, and then creates behavior, this process, can we train it? At least can we train it in the way that we treat training and learning traditionally within organizations? And as I already said, drum roll, the big astounding answer is that they don't work. We don't see the positive effect, the change, if you want. And especially, this is a keyword, the behavioral change, the tangible, real world impact of such training to the decrease of these negative phenomena that sometimes cognitive biases bring. So I put here just few sources for you. for example, the problem with implicit bias training, it's well motivated. We are all sure that people come from a very correct place, from a positive place, and they want to create change. But unfortunately, these programs have not created, there is no evidence that they create the change we need. Also from The Guardian, on the bottom, you see unconscious bias training alone will not stop discrimination. So actually, it doesn't work as strongly or even at all as we thought. And one of the most important studies on the topic is what you see on the right of your screen. Why doesn't diversity training work? The challenge for industry and academia. And you will see that in the bottom, I have highlighted a text that says, yes, hundreds of such programs dating back to 1930s. And studies about this program suggest that this training does not work. It does not reduce bias, or it does not alter behavior, and it does not actually change the workplace. So what is happening? Everybody recognizes that biases can lead us to very harmful decision-making and very harmful behaviors at work. Everybody recognizes we need to do something about it. But the thing we decided to do about this, which is, as I said, the automatic reaction of the management brain, is training. Let's train people. It doesn't work. And it doesn't work, if you notice from the last study that I mentioned, we know that it doesn't work since 1930s. So it goes a long way back, that this trying to train your unconscious biases, your implicit thinking, not explicit. Explicit is in the full conscious, the implicit, the one that is not fully articulated in your own mind. This kind of training, trying to change this, does not work. And here I have a very interesting statement by Hannah Bird. She's the principal advisor to the UK government in this specific behavioral change unit that they have, okay, the nudge unit, as the UK government calls it. And Hannah Bird says there is currently no evidence that this training changes behavior. Okay, there is no impact on the workplace concerning equality in terms of representation of women, ethnic minorities, or other minority groups. And even worse, are you ready? Even worse, not the change we want. In some cases, it's even backfiring, which means it creates more problems than the problems we wanted to solve. This is mind-blowing. How can something that we have created with the best intention to work actually doesn't work? And you see that last December in 2020, actually in the UK, the civil service scrapped, means they stopped the unconscious bias training, and they urged all the public sector employers, all the companies of the public sector, to actually stop providing unconscious bias training. And it's as she concluded, unconscious bias is a very common action, what I already said. Everybody jumped on the training of unconscious bias, but the evidence behind it does not stack up that it is effective. And please remember this, it even creates problems. That's actually unbelievable. Why is this happening? And later on, I will try to show you the neuroscience behind that, and of course what we can do. Well, these kind of trainings, they inform, but they do not motivate. They provide facts and ideas, abstract themes and topics and opinions, but it doesn't create human connectivity. It explains, it has all the rationality around the problem and what we should do, but it does not create deep meaning that our brain needs to create purpose. It doesn't do that. It changes opinions. Yes, I might have one opinion. I might say, no, hey, you're right. It's a very big problem. I need to do something like this. But it stays on the opinion. It doesn't go deep into changing behaviors. And it should work, but it doesn't work. So what is the problem? The problem goes deeper. Now, we have to be a little bit fast here. So, relax, stay with me, please. And I will do my best that at the end of my speech, it will all make sense, okay? So let's go a little bit fast to see what is this deep problem with studying human psychology and how the brain works, that actually led us to believe wrongly, that training can change deep-rooted behaviors. Okay, let me give you an example. Now, we had Black Friday a few days ago, right? Did you shop in Black Friday? Did you go and you shop? Did you shop anything in Black Friday? Electronics, books, clothes, anything. Did you buy something? Well, there is a constant discussion online that we humans are kind of very easy manipulative because evidence says that Black Friday is not the best day to buy some products. Actually, for many product categories, we can find a lower price before or after Black Friday. So this example is used by many in business, in psychology, online, in order to prove that, look, humans are easily manipulative. We are so irrational and emotional that even when there is not the best deal we can get, it's not the best price, we all go and buy them. So is evidence that humans are stupid. And I have to tell you that this is absolutely wrong. This is a very sterile, very rigid, very narrow view of what makes us human. And let me explain why actually you shopping, and me, I shopped also on Black Friday, actually makes our brain extremely intelligent. Do you have the time in your life? I don't. To, for example, when I want to buy a new laptop or a new phone or a new book, to create a list in the Excel of all the days of the year, every day to go to the 10 best providers of this product and to note the price every day. Then after I finish a year, to do the analysis and see which is the day that had the best prices. But 1 year is not enough. I have to do this in order to have good, reliable data. I have to follow this times the products I want to buy, times at least 3 years to make sure that I have reliable data, to make sure when to buy something in the best possible prices and maybe save 10 euros or $10. You see where I'm going? If we think like economists, if we think like some of the psychologists that do these studies, then our life is completely empty and it's only filled in with the strict and fanatic rationality and logic approach on creating multiple Excel files, putting prices every day, comparing, and after 3 years, finally buying a book, 3 euros or $3 cheaper than I would do it on Black Friday. But that's not clever. You see, we pinpoint something that might be smart for one case, but it's not intelligent. Because the human brain is so intelligent that understands which day to buy in order to achieve a good price. The brain will not, unless you're fanatic for a product, okay, your brain will not spend the valuable energy, the valuable brain energy, and the valuable time you have in your life in order to spend everything 3 years to search for a product. Your brain will understand from everything that it is discussed in society that Black Friday is a good enough offer, is an offer that can help you save some money, which makes value out of exactly what you want to buy. So you see where I'm going. An argument that many people use to claim that our unconscious is manipulated and stupid actually proves that our unconscious is very intelligent and makes many times the right decisions. Well done if you bought in Black Friday. I bought in Black Friday. I will buy again. It doesn't matter if we got the best offer in the 3 years, but we got a good enough offer. That's the proof, the opposite proof than some people explain. So there is this big debate in psychology. Is our unconscious stupid, dark, evil, or is it actually intelligent, clever, good? This is a big fight in neuroscience and in psychology that started in 1970s with these two scientists from Israel that you see on your screen, Tversky and Kahneman, Daniel Kahneman, that he got the Nobel of economics. And they started studying problems with decision making, especially when we use shortcuts in decision making, when we don't think something fully and we don't take the time to analyze every detail, but we take very fast decision. And indeed, they found many problems which they called cognitive biases. And today, today, we talk about more than 50 cognitive biases. Actually, I was looking at a study the other days that brought the number up to 150 plus biases. So everything is a bias. And I'm using bias now in a negative way, that we have this unconscious, fast, easy manipulative that pushes us to make constant mistakes in our lives. This is the way that bias is used here. But there is a problem. As a very famous and actually very dear to me psychologist, Gerd Geringer, is not buying it. He says, listen, maybe we have created too many biases. We see biases everywhere. And the punchline, the new bias is the bias. We are biased to see biases everywhere. The bias itself became the shortcut of our brain identifying problems in decision-making everywhere. It became like an easy solution, which is one size fits all. If we see somebody making mistakes, it's because they have a bias. And then we create hundreds of biases. So obviously there is something wrong with this way of thinking. Obviously, and if you remember the example of Black Friday, maybe the unconscious is not as stupid, and it's not, even when it takes fast decisions. Fast decision doesn't mean easy decision. In order for the brain to take a fast decision, it has to encode experiences, emotions, relations, learning, incentives, better or good, from years of our lives. So it might look like a fast decision, but actually it's a decision based on years and years and years of the brain creating or making up its mind. The brain, to make up its mind, it needs years and years and years of encoding of multi-layered information. And Kahneman, Daniel Kahneman, the one that he is the main advocate of biases, actually now accepted it. And in a recent interview, he said, you know what? I think that biases are overdiagnosed. We kind of see biases everywhere, and maybe bias is not the biggest problem of decision making. And he came up with another term, which is called noise, which is not a bias, actually. So even Kahneman himself comes out and says, you know what? Maybe we overdid it with these biases. And even to his, I mean, it's amazing that he said this. And bravo, congratulations that he said. He said, our goal is not to cancel intuition, maybe to delay it a bit. And the fact that he said this, he recognized that intuition, implicit thinking, unconscious decision-making is actually not evil, stupid, and wrong. It's actually very intelligent, it's very adaptive, but of course, it makes mistakes. And other scientists, psychologists and behavioral economists, Dan Ariely, his first book was Predictably Irrational, the hidden forces that shape our decisions, how many mistakes we do when we are not purely rational. But then he wrote another book, and he said, the upside of irrationality. Oh, there are many benefits in life. There is intelligence in the unconscious that is not leading us only to mistakes, but is also leading us to fantastic achievements, relations, and growth in life. So it's not as easy as it looked. It's not bias bad, hard rationality and logic and thinking good. Actually, it's not like that. This dual kind of approach, we now understand, is not helpful and probably is very wrong. So what is the problem with biases? It's how we perceive biases. Biases are not evidence of stupidity of the human brain or of an unevolved mind. You know, there are some scientists that say, oh, we have a prehistoric brain, but today's society is too complex for our prehistoric brain to solve problems. What if I tell you the problems are also solved by our unconscious mind? So biases are evidence of an intelligent, adaptive, actually it's called the adaptive unconscious. It's of an intelligent, adaptive unconscious that is not perfect. So when we talk about biases, don't think that biases is evidence of a broken system. The system is not broken, but the intelligence of the adaptive unconscious gets some things wrong. And sometimes it gets things very wrong. And this is what I'm here to explain, how to react, not by training. Okay, so let me ask you one of the most important questions that anybody will ask you in your life. At least this was the impact on me. And you will now realize what is the problem of trying to train your unconscious brain. Do you run because you are afraid? Or are you afraid because you are running? So what comes first? Let's say you walk in the woods and you hear a noise and you start running. Did you start running because you saw the bear, the lion, the wolf, and then fear was created in you? And then you understood fear, fear has meaning, and then behavior came. Or your brain unconsciously detected the sound, maybe even detected the movement, already took the decision that there is a threat. It started working your preparation of the body to run, started increasing your heartbeats, started creating sweat for you to run for longer because sweat is cooling down the system, brought up your pulse to be ready to have strength, created laser focus to be concentrated in what you do. And so all this started in your body. And later, your conscious mind came in and said, what's happening to me? I'm afraid. This actually question, which sounds very strange, was stated by the father of modern psychology, William James. And what William James more than 100 years ago said, and many other philosophers 300 years ago, or even in ancient Rome and Greece, philosophers were saying, is that the brain receives data much more than our slow conscious mind, already process this in very fast data crunching, decides what to do, creates the cascade of movement in your body, your breathing, your blood flow, your heartbeat, your muscles are getting stiffer to be able to react. All this is already done without you. And then you come in to say, probably I'm afraid because all these things are happening. And you know what? Modern neuroscience is closer to this explanation than to the first. Is not awareness, perception, awareness, reaction. Sometimes it's a reaction, awareness, perception. It's exactly the opposite. Because the brain receives 11 million bits of information per second, 11, and you receive only 60 in your conscious mind. It's too limited. So this is how it works. There is external stimuli, things that are happening outside of you and inside of you, outside and inside of you. The brain considers this as information in order to see, am I okay? Am I moving out of my viable state, my homeostasis? Is everything okay? Do I have to do something to return to my viable margin of being? Then, okay, maybe I need to react to something. So it takes the decision and it initiates the action. And after that, conscious emotions, emotional feelings, and evaluation happens in order to create to contextualize everything. So your brain understands first, reacts first, and you come in later. And this is something that I need actually 3 days to unpack. This is one of the most helpful slides I ever saw in my life to explain what an emotion is. Because in the science of psychology and neuroscience, there is a big debate of what actually emotions actually are. And one of the best ways to explain it is to say that emotion is not one thing. Emotion is a collection of elements. And you see these elements here, and you see them also going from the bottom to the top. So when something happens and your brain realizes from the outside world or from inside, like pain, from inside you, first it will understand what is this? Is it something good, bad? And will activate basic motivation and what action you need to take. All this is already taken in milliseconds. Then your body starts to change because your brain has to create action, and action comes through your body. So your body biomarkers change, as I explained. This is still unconscious. Then these changes of the body come in the surface and you can see them, you can feel them, and other people can see them. Then when the biomarkers become overt, known to you, like maybe when I feel embarrassed, I turn red. Sometimes I don't feel I turn red, sometimes I feel I turn red. If I feel that I turned red, then this is now became known, overt biomarker. Then it is feelings, that the feeling is a monitoring of all these reactions, and at the very end is appraisal. What happened? What does it mean for me and for my community? What I can do next? So this is the hierarchy of how the unconscious brain understands reality, perceives reality, reacts to reality, initiates what you will do, and then later, you see that there is meaning on it. I can explain it in a different way. When whatever, for example, you see every single second in your life does not go directly to the visual processes part of your brain, which is in the back. In the back, the human brain is all about vision. It's called the occipital lobe. So back here, it's all about vision. But when we take images from the external world, they don't go directly to your occipital visual center. They first go to a system that is called the thalamus in the center. The thalamus will decide, is this urgent? Does it need direct action? Do I need to react fast? Do I need to prepare the body about something? And when the thalamus will decide this, then information goes and it is communicated to other parts. You see that the brain has developed multiple systems of process and analysis and decision making, which is much deeper than what we think in everyday life. Okay. And let's go now to connect this with unconscious bias training. This is a fantastic article written by Francesca Gino and Catherine Kaufman in Harvard Business Review, that they talk about the problems with unconscious bias training. You can all find it online. I really recommend it, together with the other sources that I show you here. And what Gino and Kaufman say is that increasing awareness isn't enough. We need to go deeper. That's the problem. This is the big reveal. If our brain works like this, if the brain works bottom up, not top down, it's not me, Nikolaos, with his ideas and opinions and theories and models that I will come like a tyrant and I will push my deeper brain to obey. Actually, that doesn't happen at all. It needs to work not top down, but bottom up. And the cognitive and unconscious bias training that we provide is a top-down approach. It tries to explain theories, to win opinions, but not to go deeper and say to the unconscious brain, convince, embrace, take with us, the unconscious brain, that this is an important change, behavioral to do. Unconscious bias training is superficial. And it does not take into account how the brain really works. Now, what are the problems? As I said, I already mentioned, in order for unconscious bias training to work, it has to be bottom up, not top down. Don't show Excel and pie charts and data and all this to try to convince me. No, don't start with this. Start deeper. Also, it has to be embodied, not abstract. I need to feel it, to have my basic, deeper emotions motivated to do the action that you ask me. Not just abstract ideas that remain on the slide on a PPT. Slides and ideas on a PPT are two-dimensional. They just stand there. They do nothing for my deeper brain. Nothing. So it has to be through the body, not through just ideas. Also, it has to be experiential, not analytical. Unconscious bias training probably must be renamed to unconscious bias experience. It's not training that you will put me in we will put our people in a classroom and try to teach them not how their unconscious bias is not to behave badly and create all the stereotypes and the discrimination that sometimes they do. this does not happen in a classroom. It has to go out of the classroom and be real in real life. This is how the deeper brain structures, the one that creates our behavior, they understand reality, not abstract ideas. They learn through by doing, not by memorizing. Okay. And this is on this topic, Maxine Williams, which is Google's global director of diversity, had a fantastic statement where she says that changing attitudes and behaviors, numbers can take us only as far. Algorithms and statistics do not capture what it feels like to be discriminated against and to experience a biased corporate culture on a daily basis. Numbers are not experiential. Numbers are analytical. And very nicely, she closed by saying that a deeper and more personal approach is needed. We need to do more work. We need to go beyond the superficial territory and deeper. But to dig deeper, we need to spend time, to spend effort, and to believe in it, not just deliver a PPT. Okay, and the last one, it has to be social, not isolated. Don't teach my mind to change a social behavior by treating me as an individual. You have to treat me as a living, breathing member of a community, of social groups. And this is also a great statement by the author of The Extended Mind, something that I think that will amaze you as much as it amazed me when I first in neuroscience came up with this. I was introduced to these ideas. Look what Annie Murphy Paul said. Thinking might feel like a solo activity. When you think, you might think that you think alone, like something we do solely inside our own heads. But an emerging perspective in neuroscience and psychology says that thinking is fundamentally a social process. Our brains have evolved to think with people, to teach people, to learn from people, to argue with people, to convince people to be convinced, to do things together, to exchange story, to play music together, to dance together, to act together. This is why when we do all this, our brain fills in with happy chemicals, okay, with happy neurotransmitters, when we do things together. But our Western society is too individualistic. As a consequence, she says, when we think socially, we think differently and we think better. So unconscious bias training should not have me as an individual, as a unit. It should not be divisive. It should not divide us into small pieces of islands isolated between ourselves. On the contrary, in order for unconscious bias training to work, it has to connect us. It has to work in groups when we all do things together. And this togetherness will convince my deeper brain to act in the way that we want. So I think, therefore we are. This is one of my favorite topics. I put a lot of posts and articles on this. If you follow me in social media, you will see that actually Descartes, the famous, I think, therefore I am, now neuroscience actually finds it as probably wrong and dangerous. I think, therefore we are. It's because we are here. Actually, if I isolate you, if you are isolated and you don't have interaction with other people, your thinking breaks down completely. Okay. Now let's go to the deep, to the more also practical ways of dealing with unconscious bias and training and the negative aspects of unconscious bias at work. What can we do? So I will focus here in one aspect of, which is actually one of the biggest aspects of stereotype and discrimination at work, which is in-group versus out-group mental states, because it's a very strong finding in neuroscience that our brain behaves automatically differently towards the people that the brain considers to be in my group, which is my in-group, and towards the people that the brain somehow has decided that they're not in my group, they're in another group. So my brain automatically takes decisions through the process that I showed you, perceives reality differently, crunches it differently, assigns different meaning, creates different action based off if my brain recognizes in milliseconds, somebody as in my group or not in my group. This, evolutionary speaking, has been very important for the humankind development as we are here today. And from neuroscience, I want to show you the key things that the brain decides if you are in my in group or if you are in my out group. So look at this. Perception of people. As in milliseconds, we have specific neurons in our brain that recognizes other people. In milliseconds, the brain will use different neurons, different neural networks to recognize and assign value and meaning to people that are in our in group, and different neural networks to people that are in the out group. Second, empathy. My brain will allow me to feel the pain, to experience the pain and the sorrow of somebody that it is in my in group, but it will not allow me to experience the pain and the sorrow of people that are in the out group. There, I will be more cold and distant. Mentalizing. My brain will not automatically try to decode what other people are thinking if they're not in my in group. In my in group, my brain immediately wants to recognize what you might be thinking so I can respond to that appropriately. Now, there is one catch there. My brain will engage very much to try to decode what people out of my group are thinking if they are threatening. So I really want to see my enemy, what is thinking, right? Then moral sensitivity. This is probably one of the most difficult, which is my brain will be more sensitive in morality to people that are not in my group than to people in my group. What does this mean? If somebody in my group does something which is not in my morality, I might turn a blind eye. I might forgive them. Or I might find an explanation to excuse them. But if somebody from my out group does something that doesn't go with my values, then I will be extremely against them. So we are much more sensitive to people, to the morality of people from that we perceive in the other group than in our group. With our group, we're a little bit more flexible. Okay, and reward system. Our brain produces different happy chemicals when we see and interact people that are in our group than in the out group. Now, everything on this should be discussed, but because we don't have the time, I focused only on empathy. I'm very fanatical on the topic of empathy. I think empathy is one of the key systems of our brain that makes us human, that we are born with very strong empathy networks, as we see from research, but then these empathy networks might be weakened or strengthened. And we need to see, I have written academic papers about this. I have my own content and training content, etc. It's really one of the key issues in our society, how to make sure we don't lose the empathy we have, and how to make the empathy we have stronger. So let's focus on empathy. First of all, we are not doing very well. Globally, there is something that's called the empathy deficit. Actually, President Obama said back in 2006 that we are always focusing on monetary and fiscal deficit, but actually the real deficit we need to focus on is the empathy deficit. The fact that more and more we care only about ourselves and we don't feel emotional, we don't connect deeply with other people. And he said very rightly that when we become leaders, we need to cultivate this, but it's becoming more and more difficult because we live in societies that tell us what? How to be more rich, okay, how to be more famous, how to be more entertained, me. When we live in a society that says me, myself, and I, then the brain learns and switches off empathy networks and switches on narcissism. And we see it, you see here, there is a drop in how empathy is measured in the West. Actually, this drop is stronger now. There's some evidence that the drop is even steeper the last 10 years. And when empathy drops, what increases? Narcissism. So the less empathetic we become, the more narcissistic we become. Me, myself, and I. And as I said, the last few years, there is evidence that this is even worse. Why? Because of social media. That social media, there's so many studies that show how my own studies as well with electroencephalogram and other neuroscientific tools, we find that the brain loves being in social media, finds it so important, but the final impact on our well-being, our emotional and mental well-being, is many times extremely negative. And this is the context by which we should come to save empathy, to infuse, to protect, and to develop empathy to all of us. It's our role. It's a key role in education. It's a key role in the public sector. It's a key role in civil society. It's a key role in organizations and in businesses. Is how to allow empathy to flourish, because the numbers are not good. Okay, let's see how. Okay, I'll give you just a few examples in order to, because our time also is running out. I will give you a few examples of how empathy is boosted. But please, while I'm explaining this, please have in mind what we said up to now, that the brain really develops bottom up, not top down. It's not the theory of empathy that will make you more empathetic. I cannot have a webinar of empathy and your empathy will increase. I cannot show you a PPT presentation and your empathy will increase. Maybe it can, but momentarily, okay? But in order to have a strong, hardwired change, you need to experience empathy. You remember, not top down, bottom up. That's it, what you need to know about the brain. Not top down, bottom up. So look at some very famous examples of how to increase empathy. Patricia Moore was 26 years old. I think it was in the 70s, if I remember correctly, where she was a designer, a graphic designer, a product designer, actually. And she did not understand how, being 26 years old, could design products for the elderly, for people 75, 80, 85. How can a 26 years old brain understand the needs of an 80 years old brain? You know what she did? Look at the picture. It's fascinating. She lived like an 80 years old person for months. She put on glasses that she could not see well. She put on weights on her legs in order to walk like an old person, in order to understand, to have a first person view of how these people experience life, bottom up, not top down. So when you want to experience the life, understand deeply, create meaning about somebody else's life, you need to not just mentally step into their shoes, not mentally, go and live like them. This is how it works. We have to create programs that we take people that the problems of other people look distant and abstract and two-dimensional. So their brain creates distance. We need to take these people and embed them, put them in the situations to experience the hardships of some lives. And then there is a big possibility that they will create deep meaning, as we have evidence from both case studies and studies. And there is, for example, fantastic NGOs around the world. This NGO is called Artomancy. There is another one which is called Roots of Empathy. These NGOs work with people to create experiences that, again, puts you in a position to experience life as somebody else. For example, Artomancy take you to a museum with a guide. You are blindfolded, so to understand the world as a blind person. And a guide is taking you through the museum, explaining what is around. And this should be creating the experience of how it is to engage, to interact with the world as somebody, for example, with lower sight. Roots of Empathy, as I mentioned, is a Canadian NGO which goes to schools and works with kids at schools to improve empathy. How? Sometimes they bring a baby in the room and they ask the kids to develop toys and interact with the baby, and the group of the kids that create the best toy that the baby interacts wins. So, and these kind of interventions were found to decrease bullying, decrease emotional stress and emotional tension, and increase even academic achievement. Absolutely amazing. Okay, so experience. What else? What if we cannot live the experience firsthand? Then let's use technology. We now have research. Okay, this one comes out of Stanford, where when virtual reality is used nicely and creatively, and we put people in virtual Google's glasses in order to experience a situation, they become much more connected and emotionally invested in this situation than they were before. So in this case, for example, they asked some participants to put VR glasses and go into the world of homeless people and experience through point of view, first person point of view, many things of the difficulties and the hardships of being a homeless person. And then they measure their empathy and indeed their connection, empathy, as well as their willingness to intervene and do something about it, increased. So Google glasses, VR glasses, okay, Google glasses maybe when they resurface. The same with immigration crisis. Same technique was used by in other research projects where they use this for people to experience how it is, for example, to be in an immigration camp. And then many people that were either neutral or against immigration, all of a sudden they wanted to help and they wanted to change their behavior towards immigration. So it can do great stuff. Also, if you read literature, you develop your empathy. Why? Because when you read literature, you live, you experience in your mind's eye and in your heart what's happening in the book. You cry, you get angry, you anticipate, you get sad. You go through an emotional journey through the storytelling of the book. So what I would recommend here, and it's already happening, why don't we create in companies book clubs or art clubs or video or movie clubs where we allow people to experience literature and storytelling from different backgrounds, and we discuss this and we exchange ideas and we read some more in order to touch us in a deeper way. We have the evidence from scientific research that reading literature, not so much in structural books, handbooks and PPTs, okay, no PPTs, but reading books can really touch you and change the ways of the brain. And I will finish with one of my best examples, which is how one of the most difficult, one of the most touching examples I've ever saw in my life. And this is how a blues musician, an African-American blues musician, managed to change the hearts of more than 200 Ku Klux Klan members. How did he do this? A remarkable man called Darrell Davis. He decided to approach one-to-one extreme hate groups, people from this extreme hate group, and to befriend them and show them a human touch and a human face. And the majority of them abandoned the hate group and joined in the wider human family that we all belong to. This is really fascinating. And I'm not showing this example by accident. It's actually a long insight in psychology, history, and neuroscience that our brain does the worst when it considers the other as non-human, when it creates an attitude that this person is not human. And because they are not human, then I'm allowed to be more destructive, aggressive. Well, if I considered you a human, I would have my best coming out of me. And we know through history, through propaganda and wars, how every propaganda machine tried to make the enemy subhuman by using animal names and many other dark times in our history. We need to embrace our humanity and to show that we are human. Of course, please don't get me wrong. Not everybody can be saved. Somebody that is too extreme and they don't want to change, we need to fight and we need to isolate them. That's clear. But there is a big part of these groups that we can take with us. I will finish with Sarah Conrad's statement, which I find also fascinating, and to kind of highlight again the fact that we are part of a wider human community, not just the small groups we feel we are locked into. So she says community interactions are important to build up because when we're interacting with our neighbors, interacting with our coworkers, or attending religion or other religious services or groups of various kinds that are community-based, we're interacting with the people we might not be in our tightest in-group. And that can challenge us and help us to grow and expand our circles of empathy. This is hacking the brain. This is hacking empathy. This is creating the right shortcuts of thinking, not the bad ones, the bad biases that create discrimination, stereotyping, and hate towards others, but that create connections, create love, and create this unity. It's actually between division and unity, and create this unity that our brains are more hardwired for than anything else. So let's summarize. We need to decrease. Do you want in your organization people to be more ready to unconsciously first and emotionally first to change their behavior rather than just agreeing, yes, sure, I will do it, then just superficially saying yes and then actually not doing anything to follow this? Let's see what we should do. We should decrease perceived threats, burnout, because when your brain is burnout, it has what is called ego depletion. Ego depletion means it is less able, your brain, to stop some bad urges. So maybe you will say something that you wouldn't say if you were full of energy. So burnout needs to be decreased. General anxiety, same. Depression, burnout, general anxiety, and depression are now recognized by the World Health Organization as important symptoms within businesses, and that businesses need to step up and do something about it. And of course, COVID situation made this even worse. We need to decrease social toxicity within our companies. We need to decrease time pressure. When you are pressured for time, your brain will become more egoistic. When everybody we go to work and we cannot breathe, we die, we don't know if we will make it. How are we going to care for the other? How? Physical social isolation. If somebody is isolated, this person will never change. We need to embrace this person. We need to stop top-down approaches, superficial idea-based approaches and theory-based approaches. We need to create a completely different intervention journey. And last, we need to stop with short-term ineffective solutions. What we need to increase is first-hand experiences, virtual reality and other technologies that can help, personal storytelling, befriending. Let's try to befriend really some people and take them with us. Diverse fiction and art, as we saw. Direct interaction and participation works very well. Bottom-up approach, long-term real solutions. It's not easy. I will finish with that. It's not easy. It cannot happen over time. I'm sorry to say so. I apologize that the brain does not follow this modern management approach of quick fixes, one size fits all, let's do it tomorrow. No, that's not how the brain works. Of course, it can work like this. If you punish somebody and create trauma, then of course they will change overnight, but that's not the change we want to create. Okay. So in order for the brain to embrace the things that we discuss, it needs time. It needs space. It needs emotional support. It needs experience. It needs love. And this is the key word of today. It's love. This is a painting based on Aesop's story for the fight between the northern wind and sun. Maybe you know Aesop, right? The ancient Greek storyteller. More than 2,000 years after, we still circulate and learn from his stories. Maybe you've heard for the sour grape story, which is we use it very often today, the sour grapes. But that's actually my favorite story of his. And what does this story say? So there was a person, a farmer, walking in the mountain. You see the farmer down there. The farmer was actually covered with very heavy clothing, sheepskin and other very heavy. And the sun and the northern wind made an agreement, a wager. They said, let's see which of the two of us will actually make the farmer to take off his heavy clothing. This is an amazing storytelling about change and human nature. So, which is more than 2,000 years old. So north wind started blowing. The more the north wind was blowing, the more the farmer, actually, I think it was a herdsman, he had out some sheep, the more he was wrapping himself and trying to grab himself on the clothes to be warmer more, and the north wind was going stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and he was going down and trying to, and of course the north wind gave up. North wind said, I cannot blow so strong, the wind to be so strong in order for the farmer to take his heavy clothes out. The sun appears and says, let me try. And the sun starts very slowly and very lightly to warm up. And to warm up, the sun put the clouds away, put the north wind aside, and started with the sweet sun rays to touch the skin, the face of the farmer. The farmer starts getting more confident, starts having more strength, felt the warmth of the sun, and slowly, steadily, but surely took his heavy coat out. So let's not be like the north wind. Let's be like the sun and create change through love. Thank you so much.
Nicolas, thank you very much for such an interesting presentation. I have some questions coming from the audience, if you can take them. So many ideas to work on. I would like to ask you, is there any questions we can ask ourselves to change our behavior when we are acting automatically?
Okay, it's a great question. And first of all, let me tell you that acting automatically is fantastic. Most of the things that makes you wonderful in what you do are actually acting automatically. So we need to, acting automatically is not automatically bad. Okay, this was my whole speech about. So it's wonderful that you act automatically. And we have a lot of evidence that acting automatically in many situations brings the right decision and success in life. However, many times it gets it wrong. What can you do about this? Don't ask yourself anything. Because you, me, we are not the right observers of ourselves. Unfortunately or fortunately, evolution did not give to our conscious mind the ability to be objective and to observe our behavior as it is. So ask other people. I think one of the best exercises you can do is, as now, for years now in management, we have this 360 degrees evaluation. Ask people around you, but not only people at work. Ask people that love you, like your friends, and they are ready to say something that maybe you're not doing correctly. Ask your family. Okay, ask people that maybe you met in some events, and you want some ideas of how they see you. So don't trust your conscious mind's evaluation of yourself. It's better to trust others, and even more, and it's a little bit scary what I'm going to say, we are now using electroencephalogram and other ways to go into the brain and learn from the brain directly, how the brain automatically reacts without me as conscious Nikos intervenes. So instead of asking yourself, ask other people, and soon enough, we will ask the brain directly through the technology that exists.
Thank
it's
you
more objective.
I have another question here, and it says, how can we motivate other people's actions?
So how do we motivate? We are social animals. This is one of the biggest turnarounds. Okay, one of the biggest changes in scientific thinking is, are humans individuals like sharks, let's say in nature, which are many species of sharks are very individualistic, or are people a collective species like, let's say, ants and bees. And you can actually observe science and see that in the beginning, the last 200 years after Enlightenment and the scientific method, we were more thinking of human beings as individual, isolated, me, myself, and I kind of creatures. But more and more through neuroscience, we find the opposite. It's the biggest twist. The biggest plot twist in human history is that actually we are much more collective. There is a saying, you are the average of the 6 people you interact more with. Okay? This is, for example, the way to think about where we are extremely. This is why the brain is adaptive. This is why it's called adaptive. And this is why we have neuroplasticity, the way that the brain learns and changes. And this is because we survive and thrive through others. And this is why, and even the biggest mystery, which is consciousness. Why should we be conscious and not completely unconscious? Although consciousness as a phenomenon was up to now was considered the evidence of individuality, now there is many theories and proofs that actually consciousness is there for us. My consciousness is here in order for me to look at you and think in my mind, what are you thinking? What should I do? What is this person thinking? What is that person thinking? And then create a response which is appropriate for us to collectively achieve things. So I think, therefore, we are. And this is why we motivate others. Don't forget that leadership is a phenomenon that goes back ages. Leadership is a trait, a physical trait of human beings. And leadership, because this is where motivation is important, leadership was the ability of somebody in our group to take us from one place which we don't like to another place that we like. Actually, it has to do with geographical reassignment. When we were in tribes, we were here, maybe other tribes were attacking us, maybe we didn't have any more food. The leader was the person that has the vision and motivate us to create collective action, to take us from here, there. This is great leadership. Great leadership is a journey from the now that it's harmful to the then which is positive. And motivation is a natural leadership trait of creating this collective action.
I have a couple more questions. Do you think that technology makes us more or less thinking? It comes from the audience as well.
That's a fantastic question. And there are books, both. There is a book called Smarter Than You Think that explains how technology really unleashed our collective efforts and our collaboration. Now I'm, for example, in Belgrade, in Serbia. I collaborate with you, that you are in studio in Argentina, or these other people that are around. This could not happen before. So definitely technology, and especially ICTs, communication is a big part of this technology, allowed us really to connect and to create much bigger partnerships that were not feasible to be done before. So definitely technology helped us. I'm not sure if it helped us to think less, but maybe to think better. Okay, but there is also the other view, which is we experience all every day through our mobile phones. We are addicted to many of these apps and solutions, which maybe does not allow our brain to engage with the empathy networks and all the other wonderful things, but on the contrary, much more with narcissism, closed-mindedness, and even hate towards others. The problem with technology is the following. I will just say this. Technology always goes one direction, meaning we created the wheel. We will not recreate it. We created the plane. We always move forward. But emotionally, morally, and socially, it's not a one-directional move. It can go up and down, which means that we can use the technology to also progress society, but we can also use technology to create worse situation for society.
Thank you, Nicolas, so much. And I have the last one here. Sometimes we do not know how to identify emotions, or we are confused about them. For example, anguish with fear. Is there any learning about emotions that we can learn socially?
amazing question. And whoever asked me, let's have a whole session about it, because the neuroscience of emotion is such a fascinating field. So indeed, there is something in psychology that is called the misattribution error, which means that the brain decision, you remember, bottom up, first the brain perceives what is happening, activates motivational systems. So the basic emotions, this is joy, this is fight, this is reward, this is punishment, etc. Understands all this, takes a decision, and then creates the cascading effects, all the domino effect that has to go through our body, and then our conscious mind for us to behave and react to this. Now, this misattribution error is when the brain decided something else, but we as conscious mind completely misunderstand it. And although, let's say, we felt fear, actually we thought we felt desire. And that's an actual experiment that happens, a very famous experiment in psychology. So regardless that the psychologist induced fear, people were saying, actually, I feel desire. Completely different things. We are not the best. You remember that I told you? Our conscious mind has not evolved. The purpose of the conscious mind does not seem to be fully aware of what is happening. Is to execute some specific actions and with partnership with the other brain systems to achieve things. So there is now latest research that says the better we label the emotions, the better we deal with them. So what I'm always trying to motivate people is to learn more about their brain, their nervous system, their body, because I'm talking about the brain, but the brain is not alone. There is brain, there is nervous system, there is body, there is community, there is environment. It's all of this together. It's not just the brain. It's this all system. And learning more about this really empowers you to notice the intuitive motivations that do the best for you and your environment, or that do the worst for you and your community. It's about time to understand, to listen to our deeper emotions and intuition, not immediately to act on it. What Kahneman said, we can even delay it a little bit, but not to cancel it. The worst thing you can do as a person is try to cancel or override your intuition, because your intuition makes who you are.
Nicolas, thank you very much for such a great conversation. So many ideas to think about. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Seguimos adelante con todos ustedes. Cuánto para pensar, ¿no? Estoy segura.
Let's move on. There's so much to think about. I'm sure that on the other side, you have started to take down notes, so many ideas for us to get going. How many biases that we need to be aware of, but this goes beyond bias. He said, from abstract to what goes through your body, not top down, but bottom up, not to base on the analytics, but on the experience. He has shared with us many ideas that have come now to our mind and to our hearts after having listened to Nicolas. Thank you all. Thank you all of you who are joining this conference. You are joining us from many different countries. Tell us on the social media what you think about this conference, and stay tuned because we have much more to continue sharing with you. And there's a lot to learn from this word, intersectionality, not just to remember it, but to put it on, as Margaret and Nicolas have tried to do with us. Remember that we are using Vital Voices, ARC, social media, and we also have the hashtags Jornada Anual VVA, and we're also using Género y interseccionalidad. So we want to see you, we want to read your comments, and we would also like to ask you where you are joining us from. What cities are you at? What countries have you joined us from? So that we can start also a conversation going on the social media. Let me share with you the QR code so that you can grab your phones, and through this QR code and through Menti, you can tell us what city and what country you are joining us from. We have much more for you in terms of not only our biases, but how we can make our different identities converge. Shortly, we will have two very interesting panels from Latin American and global companies who are working on these topics. So stay tuned. You have the QR on your screen. You can access this QR code. We encourage you to take your phones and tell us. We will share this with you as if we were together in the same physical place. Some words are already on their way. A lot to do with experience. Nicholas stressed empathy. There's so much to work on in connection with empathy, a word that may seem to be abstract, but it has a lot to do with our daily lives and leadership models. I hope that you can all start sharing your thoughts around these messages. This is the 13th Vital Voices conference, Southern Cone. We encourage you to share your comments. Last year, we talked about bias. We talked about gender bias. We have learned a lot. And today, we want to take a step further. We encourage you to ask about not just bias, but what intersectionality is about. So let's make a short break, just a 5-minute break, just to get ready, to grab a cup of coffee or a gourd of mate, and we will see you in 5 minutes.
Bienvenidos nuevamente, aquí seguimos en esta
Welcome again. Here we are at our 13th Vital Voices Southern Cone session. I hope you grabbed a cup of coffee and that you're ready for what's coming next, because we have much more to share with you. We are having a great morning. We're talking about intersectionality from different approaches, a 360 approach. We will take away many ideas and inspirations and ready to action. Remember that we are using the social media with hashtags that we will be sharing with you. We will be reading them out to you, and we will share with you questions. It's a great time because here with us, let me welcome Alice Nelson, who's President and CEO of Vital Voices Global Partnership. Alice graduated from Fletcher Tufts University, and she has a degree also from Emerson College. She has worked for Vital Voices for more than 20 years as Vice President and Senior Director for programs before she took office in this current position in 2009. Under her leadership in Vital Voices, she has broadened her scope to serve more than 18,000 leading women in more than 182 countries. And now let's welcome Alice to this meeting. Hello, how are you? Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to be speaking in English, and so I'm sure there's translation. But if you can read my sweatshirt, I think it's my mantra, and hopefully it's the words of the day, which is use your power to empower. I know that all of you who come together as part of the Vital Voices of Argentina, that we are so incredibly proud to support, with also all of the sister chapters from the Southern Cone. It's really incredible to see the phenomenal collaboration. I know that throughout your gathering, you've really been talking about the issues around intersectionality. And I think if you think about the turbulent events of the last 2 years, it has really further exposed systematic injustices and really searing inequities in our world. We've been forced to look deeply and really look at what it takes to create true progress in our countries and communities. And honestly, I firmly believe, I am more convinced than ever before, that the lessons and the leadership of women are more relevant now than ever before. Our world is still grappling with the catastrophic threat of COVID-19, but also the shadow pandemic, that pandemic that came on the heels, that was about the rise of violence against women, that shadow pandemic. We saw a 30% rise globally of violence against women. We also saw that women, minority women, were forced out of jobs at much higher rates than anyone else. COVID-19 claimed countless lives. It devastated families and communities on every single nation on the planet. And women often became those caretakers and frontline defenders. Healthcare services and economic systems crackled under the weight of the enormous and really unparalleled pressure of the pandemic. I think across every sector and industry, we've been affected. And just as we start to see the flickers of light at the end of the tunnel, I think there's still no way of knowing the long-lasting consequences of this pandemic. The stakes have never felt higher to me. We've watched in real time the life and death results of leadership in action. In the middle of so much uncertainty, I think what has become clear at this stage is that certain leadership qualities are making a critical difference. Empathy, truthfulness, collaboration, ingenuity, decisiveness are front and center in those leaders in countries and communities that have weathered this storm better, and have not only weathered this storm, this COVID-19 storm, but are more prepared and more responsive to the crisis that is coming soon, which is the climate crisis. From Taiwan to Germany, Finland to New Zealand, women presidents and prime ministers have met this moment and are prepared to meet future moments with strength and compassion. The leaders that I have met over my 24 years, including women from throughout the region, They have shown this distinctive leadership model. And we have seen again and again across generations and cultures and religions and various sectors and ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, that women have these core qualities of leadership that are desperately needed. First, we see that women lead with a deep sense of purpose, a driving force that propels them forward and shapes their vision for progress. Second, we know that women leaders have strong roots in their communities. They understand the problems, they see the potential. Third, their willingness to cross those lines that divide. They forge unlikely alliances. They make room for diverse voices in order to develop truly sustainable change and solutions. Fourth, they embrace creativity, boldness. They're not afraid to explore alternative methods and set audacious goals. And fifth, women leaders consistently choose to pay it forward, to use their power to empower. They invest through mentoring in a rising generation, and certainly you do that through the mentoring walks each year. They proactively set in motion a virtuous cycle of support and solidarity. I think it's just a glimpse of what is possible if we elevate and expand women's leadership around the globe and in our own backyards. Here in America, sadly, in 2021, it is far too many people still think it's controversial to state the simple fact that Black Lives Matter. And we know that this is not just an American problem. Racism, and particularly anti-Blackness, is a global crisis, and we've got to confront it alongside the fight for women's empowerment. Social justice and anti-racial movements are in large part led by Black women. We must elevate their voices and their ideas, because what's become abundantly clear is that today's world isn't set up to solve the challenges of tomorrow. The greatest problems our world face right now, from access to quality healthcare, to addressing climate justice, to tackling gender inequity and rooting out racial justice, they're deeply interconnected. We urgently need new ideas and new voices to lead us forward. You know, in the midst of crisis, it is important that we have to remember that it is our most trying moments of shared history that have been the very moments that have led us forward, often out of necessity, to break through change. We have no choice but to do things differently. And I have never been more certain that women leaders are that difference we need. For too long, women, and particularly women of color, have been sidelined. They have been overlooked and undervalued for the very reason that we need them most in this moment. They lead differently. They bring innovative solutions forward because these leaders have been excluded. They've adapted. They've become resourceful and creative. We need their innovative style of leadership to help us emerge stronger, because we cannot rebuild our world with conventional ideas. Vital Voices was founded for women leaders and because of them. Women leaders who bring perseverance, empathy, and the clarity of purpose. They are reoccurring themes that I see again and again in the women leaders that we work with around the world. These are extraordinary times, but the momentum we've built up over the last 25 years as a movement and as an organization is anything but stalled. This year marks the 26th anniversary of the historic United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women, where we set forth and adopted the boldest agenda, believe it or not, even bolder than anything we've signed to date. This was 26 years ago. And it was really to move the lives of women forward in dramatic ways, universal equality. In America, just last year, we marked 100 years since women gained the right to vote. Of course, it wasn't all women, because so many discriminatory practices in my country really continued to disenfranchise Black women for another 45 years. until the Voting Rights Act was passed. These milestones remind us that progress is an ideal we must constantly strive for. It's a never-ending commitment and a lifelong aspiration. As the global women's movement continues to evolve, one of the things that we have to reckon with is our own failings, confront bias and exclusion. I believe so strongly that we need to lead through radical collaboration, working together, supporting each other, rather than going out into the world and being disengaged and disenchanted with the current form of status quo leadership. What we need to do is model this new form of leadership. Show people that empathy, compassion, collaboration, using your power to empower others, understanding that the only meaningful measure of power is the extent of its positive impact. The remarkable leaders who are part of this community of Vital Voices and around the world are getting us one step closer to a more equitable world. With courage and compassion, women leaders everywhere are already playing a critical role, helping their communities cope with crisis, but more than that, reimagining a future, reimagining and breaking through to a new world, a new way of doing things. And I have no doubt women's leadership is going to be instrumental in forging our new reality that our world so desperately needs. We have to imagine anew. If we make every effort to advance women leaders, the new world we create, I believe, will be more peaceful, equitable, and free. Thank you all for gathering. Thank you for your support of Vital Voices, for your engagement in this community. I'm so thrilled to be here for this gathering and celebration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. Gracias, muchísimas gracias por esta.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your inspiring words. And I will take away this concept of radical collaboration. We all need to work together in this collaboration. Thank you so much.
My key takeaway is the word collaboration.
We have had the luxury to listen to our
really a
global
pleasure
president,
for us to have our
and we will continue
global
breaking down this map of intersectionality.
There are many dimensions that intersect, and we are in a post-geographic era. The pandemic has gone through all barriers and it has torn down frontiers. So what do we have to learn from culture? And what do we mean when we say cultural inclusion? This is one of the questions that we will have with the next speaker. I would like to introduce Tanya Kleindis. She's a specialist in organizational development at Harvard University, founder and administrative director of Ready to Reach. She works with leaders in all business sectors to inspire change through behavioral sciences. We will talk about cultural inclusion. Tanya, I turn it over to you. We have some connectivity issue. In the meantime, we would like to remind you that you can engage in social networks. We are using Voces Vitales ARG as the handle. And here is Tanya rejoining.
Here with all of you. What an honor to be a part of this agenda and with these speakers and the wonderful content that Vital Voices has prepared for us today. As a certified leadership coach and workplace culture consultant, I help people to be more effective in their pursuits by being better people for themselves and each other. And today I'd like to talk with you about gender and culture. Specifically, why is it important to have an open conversation about cultural inclusion? And really appreciate the inspirational words that Elise has shared with us. And I'd like to start us off with an experience. If you would please view the photos of people here on the screen, engaging with one another, and imagine to yourself what you might be observing in these interactions. Take in the facial expressions, their body language, their posture, gestures, everything that you can visibly see. Do you find yourself creating a narrative, a story based on what you see, assumptions based on their cues, perhaps things about their relationship to one another? Are they colleagues, a subordinate to one another, or an advisor and their client? Are they explaining, directing, sharing? You can even sense the emotion and maybe the nature of their topic. The point is, we often meet perfect strangers and begin to look for clues about who they are and what they might relate to us, how they might relate to us. We use historical data and experiences and patterns to categorize and make sense of people in the world around us, very much about the things that Nicolaus spoke to us about. We start to get a sense of who is this person, this older Jewish female who appears to be highly educated, this parent who is tall and able-bodied and bilingual. We start to make up stories about who they are and put them into categories. It's just natural, as Nicolaus shared with us, it's just natural. We are met with processing about 11 million pieces of information per second. Our body is taking that in, as Nicolaus said, not just through our brains, but our whole body, our gut, our sense of being. We're taking all of this information in. We're only consciously aware of about 40 of these pieces of information, and we actively pay attention to less than 7. In an effort to conserve energy, our brains are trying to make sense of this, and they're automating as much as possible. We cultivate a belief system based on this information, and as Nicolaus shared, we develop a bias resulting from this historical data and patterns. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. This is really effective. Most of the time, it helps us to be really efficient, but as Nicolaus said, unintended consequences, it isn't always effective for us, especially when we're interacting with one another. And often discriminatory behaviors are the result of subconscious prejudgments by people who profess and really believe in equality. This is an explicit prejudice we're talking about. It's stereotypes that are deeply embedded in our subconscious, not even aware of the automatic response. And specifically, as we're talking about culture and intersectionality, gender oppression is tied to classism, racism, ageism, ableism. So gender justice can only truly be achieved when all forms of oppression cease to exist. A quote from the Global Fund for Women. And talking specifically about gender behavioral differences, in fact, research has shown that these stereotypical notions of male and female, our mental abilities and our behavioral expectations, they begin as early as age 6 years old. There's this study that I'm citing here. It was a Lemonade study. ABC News and researcher Campbell Leeper of the University of California, they conducted a study in which they served male and female children lemonade made with salt instead of sugar. In general, the girls tried to choke it down. They sipped politely, but the boys reacted differently. The boys told the researchers that this lemonade needs sugar, that this has salt in it instead of sugar, and even one even spit it out. And then after, they asked, the researchers asked the children, and why did you react the way that you did? How did you experience the lemonade? And the girls said that they noticed that it was wrong and off in its flavor, but they didn't want to offend the researcher. They wanted to be polite. They wanted to be respectful. The boys just said it just tasted bad and they didn't want to drink it. So you can see early on these stereotypical notions that we have in male and female, they're ingrained in us. and gender behavioral differences become apparent at a very early age. And I ask you to share in chat, in the comments, reflect on your own experiences, and can you recall that first time that you were acutely aware of your gender? Just curious about your own experiences, maybe back into childhood. Why this is important to have this open conversation about cultural inclusion, it's changing the conversation. If we're going to elevate and expand and include all of the qualities, especially all of the female, uniquely female qualities that Elise spoke of, we have to embrace all of our qualities. And there is no villain in this story. We cannot do this in this cultural inclusion. We can't do this by trying to fix women, to talk about how to change, minimize the differences, the go along to get along, change the way we speak, change the way we dress, think, and behave to fit into the mostly male-dominated workplace culture. We also can't censure men, this strong disapproval, harsh criticism that they are to blame for where we are in the gender differences within our workplace. So as I said, there's no villain in the story. We need all genders to embrace and create the kind of workplace culture that we want. So how do we do that? We need to really embrace and accept and be aware of the common cultural barriers to workplace gender equity. There are true barriers, and I just want to go through quickly a few of them with you today. The first one being parenthood. There's this notion in the modern workplace that only women have children, and the role of the man is not acknowledged and sometimes unappreciated. The assumption about how this impacts work is applied mostly to mothers, but not often fathers. It's not brought into the conversation that fathers are also parents and have responsibilities at home. In broader society, parenting and household responsibility still falls largely to women. We saw this clearly through the pandemic, and planning for childhood, responding to family emergencies broadly falls on women more than men. Accommodations such as flexible work hours, the ability to come in early or stay late, specific travel arrangements. There's a lot of accommodations that the common workplace is making today, but they seem to be designed for and utilized most by women, resulting in what we call the motherhood penalty. This affects assignments, projects, promotions, and rewards in the workplace. Also, this notion of meritocracy. There's this false assumption that cream just rises to the top just based on your own merit and working hard and earning those promotions and rewards, that it just naturally happens. We're ignoring that there's a burden that women have to work harder to take gender out of the equation. There are very subtle, often invisible barriers for women. There's also outdated systems, organizational structures, work practices that minimize that they're designed for men, and that there's a cumulative effect that disadvantage women. Outdated requirements, rigid work schedules, access to informal networks and mentoring. Also, this assumption that women don't have this trailing spouse, that they also have a spouse or a partner that is working in the workforce. So when we are assigning different geographical locations, sometimes for men, the consideration that their partner maybe need to be considered in that geographical move, but for women, that same assumption isn't always there. Not recognizing that behind the scenes and between the boundaries of your formal roles, women typically play a big role in that extra work that might fall between the cracks because it isn't in the boundaries of a specific role. And women play more of a role in that than men typically do. Also, this notion of masculinity. Competent women often fail the likability test. As in modern cultures, including my own, the American culture, masculinity and leadership qualities are very closely linked. The ideal leader like the ideal man, is decisive, assertive, and independent. In contrast, women tend to be recognized and acknowledged and appreciated for being kind, for being caregivers, for being selfless. This mismatch between conventionally feminine qualities and the expected leadership qualities put women in a double bind. All of these add up to gender bias being very systemic in the workplace, and something that we not only, as Nicolaus said, it's not enough to just be aware and know of our own cognitive biases. These are absolutely systemic in the way that we work in our workplace practices. And these practices to judge competence and evaluate good work, they're often outdated and biased. Common ways to address are good, but they're just not necessarily enough to really combat the systemic barriers. All good, not enough. We must tackle systemic bias embedded in workplace practices and in culture. I'm curious if you can share in the chat function, do any of these resonate with you? Are these barriers present in your own organization? From a no, not at all, to sometimes, not always, or yes, I see them, they are quite prevalent. I'm curious to see if these barriers resonate with you. I would love to engage and discuss all of them with you, but I'm close to the end of our time together. First, I'd like to talk about, as individuals, this intersectionality. What can we do to start to combat these things? First, consider our own layers that affect the way that we think and the way that we operate. They show up in ways around solving problems, making decisions, our communication styles, our listening skills, how we deal with conflict and manage stress. True inclusivity leads to freedom, that we can act in authentic ways about who we are and not are prescribed by gender or any other ism. And the way that organizations can start to combat these things and really just recognize and open the conversation for cultural inclusivity. I have my own intercultural inclusion model that I call REACH. We won't be able to get into that today, but some of the outcomes and things that organizations can do: declare with inclusion and diversity and equity and accessibility, make them prominent in the mission statement, in recruitment practices, in onboarding processes, in all of the talent practices. Don't have these things as off to the side or separate programs. Wherever possible, integrate them into the strategic business planning, the way that priorities are set, goals, the measurement plan, and so on, and communicate those things regularly. Integrate diversity training, not as something separate, but integrate it into business initiatives. Implement diverse talent practices, and also incorporate diversity and inclusion practices into just regular meetings and operating activities. Would love for you to reflect on where can your organization best have that return on investment? Where can you start to have the biggest, greatest improvement? And to end, for that gender justice and just overall, that ultimately no accommodations are needed because inequity has been addressed and the systemic barriers been removed. And that ultimately is our goal. So with that, I thank you for inviting me and engaging with me in this conversation. And I look forward to the rest of the conference together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tania, for such a great presentation. So many ideas to work on. Muchas gracias, Tania, por esta gran presentación. Muchas ideas también.
Thank you for the great presentation and the ideas and the key takeaways from this presentation, how to think about masculinity and how we can take action. Thank you very much. Now, let us continue with our agenda. We have intersectionality as the main theme today. Thank you for all the messages that we are getting on social media. We are sharing them. We have this big conversation that is coming up, and there are no borders. When we talk about intersectionality, there is another stakeholder. which is companies. We make up companies. We are constituents of companies. What do companies think about this? What does the corporate world think? So we would like to include the corporate outlook. The technology industry has been pioneer in including diversity in their teams. That is why we have invited two leading companies in the IT industry in order to talk about intersectionality and how they view it. In order to moderate this conversation, I will invite Maria Arismendi, the Executive Director of Voces Vitales, Vital Voices, Southern Cone. She will moderate the session. Thank you very much, Martina, and I would like to welcome you to this panel.
To be here. It's a pleasure to receive Adam, Tracy, and Kirsty in our 13th annual summit. I feel so honored to share with you this panel. And first of all, what I'd like to start saying is introducing our three guests. First of all, I'd like to invite Kirsty Russell. She's the responsible for championing Logitech's cultural evolution and partnering with the business and organization initiatives. She leads the People and Culture organization, which aims to help Logitech employees create, achieve, and enjoy more based on an underlying belief that the people over process matters. I'd also like to add that she has the privilege of living in different countries throughout her life, and I would encourage any conversation with her because she has wonderful things to teach us. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Tracy Wade. She's the Vice President, Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Oracle. As Vice President, Tracy leads global programs that build awareness of the business impact and value of a diverse and inclusive culture. She engages with senior leadership in creating and supporting equality into the workspace. Her team actively leads and supports Oracle's employee resource groups to help build company-wide communities, develop future leaders, encourage partnerships, and retain talent. Tracy played a key role in establishing the company's first D&Y strategy and team more than a decade ago. So I'm sure that Tracy, you'll be able to teach us so much about everything you've done so far. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Adam. He's joining us from Amsterdam right now, and I believe congratulations are in the order of the day. And I'd like to tell him more about this amazing Australian guest. Adam is the head of inclusion and diversity at Logitech. He has a passion for helping businesses grow profitably by developing talent and building cultures that promote D&Y. He is accountable for working with colleagues and businesses leaders to define and execute a Logitech D&Y strategy with accountability, meaningful progress, and practical action, creating a more diverse, innovative, psychologically safe, and inclusive workspace. To further enable an inclusive culture, Logitech continually focuses on improving employees' knowledge and behaviors and measuring to ensure progress. Welcome, everyone, and it's a pleasure. How you're doing? Let me see your smiles.
Yeah.
Smiling and talking.
There you go.
Okay, so as we have already discussed, I'd like this panel to be the less moderated panel of all this summit, because I believe the three of you can chat and have a really, really good idea exchange, experience exchange. So I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you, but please feel free to share everything you have to share with us today. To start with, we know the overlap of various social identities, such as race, gender, and class, contributes to discrimination experienced by an individual. When we express our desire to improve the workspace culture for our collaborators, we cannot ignore the complexity of human beings. There are many organizations on the path of adopting an organizational culture that appreciates the multifaceted aspects of people with intersectional identities. However, many still don't know where to start. That's why I would like to explore which are the main conversations you are having in your companies regarding intersectionality. But first, I'd like to take this panel into a more individualized experience, and I'd like to ask you, how was it you came to engage with intersectionality? How have you been introduced to this concept? And furthermore, do you feel that all your social identities are being recognized nowadays? So Tracy, if you'd like to start answering these questions, we'd be happy to hear you.
I'm happy to do so. So I would say that my first interaction with intersectionality is myself. I am a woman and a Black woman, underrepresented from an underrepresented community. And from that aspect, I have different experiences, or Black women and many times women that are underrepresented have different experiences from other women, from white women many times, and how we deal with just societal norms, progression in the workplace. There was a study done recently by McKinsey and about women in the workplace. And they found that Black women, certainly Latina women, have different work experiences than white women in the workplace. They're not progressing as fast. Some are leaving the workforce due to COVID, and they are leaving at a higher rate, as many women have, but leaving at even a higher rate, don't always have the same support. So, for me, my first encounter of intersectionality is just me, myself, and understanding my own self and where I stand in the workplace, and certainly the nuances of intersectionality. But, one thing I will say before I just kind of move on to others is that the beauty of intersectionality is that, there's so many different elements, that could be in place. You can have 4 different dimensions of your diversity or more. And that's the beauty of intersectionality, is that wonderful complexity that makes us all who we are, that we can lean into and learn more about. And it helps to, in most cases, increase thought leadership because we have that vast background and experience.
Thank you very much. And I agree with everything you just said. I believe that since your first encounter with intersectionality was with yourself, then that's why something tells me the path was marked for you to develop at Oracle all the D&Y strategy, and you were a pioneer in this company. So I love that, and thank you for sharing with us.
Sure.
Now, maybe I'd like to invite Kirsty to share her thoughts on this. As a woman, what can you relate into what Tracy said? Or is there anything else you'd like to add on your own experience? How have you been introduced to this concept?
I think, unlike Tracy, I was formally introduced to the concept, learning about it through DE&I years ago. Where I got to was learning about it through myself. So my first experience was an explanation of intersectionality followed by a privilege walk. And when we did the privilege walk, I assumed, here I am, cisgender, English speaker, able-bodied, white, Western, university educated. Clearly, I'm going to end up at the front of this privilege walk. And I wasn't. I wasn't at the back either. But then when we went into intersectionality and really looked at the parts of identity, several experiences in my life based on other parts of my identity than the ones I mentioned suddenly made sense to me. What was really enlightening for me was when it made sense to me personally, because I turned around, I looked at colleagues who were further back on the line in the privilege walk, and it was crystal clear to me, I am very privileged, and that the compounding effects of so many forms of discrimination had really prevented access to many others on a much deeper level. But I experienced it through aspects of my identity that I hadn't taken account of. And then I experienced it with that slap in the face of I'm still very privileged. And that was the first time I got into the concept of intersectionality.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And it was definitely a different path than the one that Tracy took. Just as interesting, because it takes a lot of courage to being introduced to a concept, maybe in our workspace because we're developing a strategy, but then being able to take action about it. So I think that even though if you said the word privilege in a lot of times, I think you're using that privilege in a good way because you're enabling conversations for others. So I think that's just as much admirable as anything. And now, Adam, I'd like to move into you. I know you're Australian. I know you come from a really, really interesting background. In fact, I believe it was your grandmother that was the first woman in the Australian Parliament. So I imagine you have strong female leaders in your own family, in your own workspace. But I'd like for you to tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you got introduced into this concept.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's a privilege to be here. I just wanted to say, and thank you for the thanks. I just got married last week to my husband, and I'm very proudly married to a man called Fetlin from Bulgaria. And I'd like to share, though, that as a gay man, when I talk about intersectionality, every time that I get into a taxi and the conversation may become personal, every moment I need to think, like in a taxi, do I come out and talk about the fact that I have a husband, or might I mention nothing? I almost have to think every day about whether or not I might come out. I'm also hoping to go back to Australia. I live in the Netherlands at the moment to see my father, who is ill. And the Australian government has rejected our visa application based on our status of being married. They don't recognize our relationship at the moment, which is quite a challenge. And I think partially that could be because he's Bulgarian and not Northern European. So when it comes to the topic of race and ethnicity, it's extremely important for me, as it is, I know you referenced Tracy, as well as my uncle, who was also fighting for rights for what we called the stolen generation in Australia. What happened in the 1920s is we took children from Aboriginal families and we wanted to whiteize them. We then created a case called the Mabo case, where we wanted to give the lands back to the Aboriginal people, and my uncle led this legal team. And we gave 70% of the land back to the Aboriginal people. So I was very proud of my family, as well as my grandmother, who was the first woman in Parliament. And I fight for equality, but also really understand what it means for intersectionality and the stigma that we all face. The last thing I'll share is when it comes to disability, I have an invisible disability that I won't share which it is due to the stigma that exists around it. And if it came to the topic of gender, perhaps we could imagine a disabled lesbian Muslim may need to deal with ableism, homophobia, Islamophobia, racism, and sexism. Could you imagine what that might be in addition to what I've described being a man? So I hope that gives a lot of context and probably a lot of questions. Thank you for having me join.
Thank you, Adam, for sharing all that with us. And I'm super proud as well of everything you've done to recognize all the rights of the Aborigines in communities in Australia. I had the pleasure of being there, so I'm quite familiar with the story. I could talk to a little people, and it's such a huge challenge. And what you're bringing, I think it's really important to talk, how can we make invisible things visible? Yeah. And what role can we play in that? And I do believe that companies and organizations have a huge role to play in this. That's why I'd like to move forward to talking a little bit more about intersectionality in the workspace. I have a nice question that has been shown and in several parts of this conversation, but I'd like for you to tell me specifically, what are Logitech and Oracle having the main conversations around intersectionality today? What are the main topics you're struggling with? What are the main ideas that are going through the companies?
You know, Kirsty, were you about to go there? Because
I was going to go, Tracy, you go.
Well, you know, first of all, let me just say, you know, Adam, thanks for sharing your story. And because I will tell you, what I heard you say is just that I felt that, because the authenticity of having to think about, do I come out every moment? That is just, let me just say to you, I felt that when you shared. So thank you for sharing that. And it lends me into thinking about intersectionality. And one of the things that our employee resource group communities is doing is having those dialogues. Our Black employee resource group, it partnered with our LGBTQ plus ERG and had the conversation, as well as our Latin community as well, our Hispanic community, to have a conversation about the intersectionality of the LGBTQ community and the different experiences that happen there as well. So we're having those dialogues, certainly within our Oracle Women's Leadership Group, the gender diversity and understanding the differences so that we can better understand how to partner, how to be allies for each other, how to support each other in the workplace. So we're having dialogues and conversations, and sometimes they can be challenging. Sometimes you have those reflective moments and you have those aha moments and you're like, wow, I didn't realize that was someone's experience. Or maybe even, personally you reflect and say, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that myself and maybe impacting others. So we're trying to have dialogues, that honesty, those conversations so that we can move the needle, bring more equity into the work space by understanding others' differences, there and the nuances to who they are.
Great. And I know, Tracy, Kirsty, you want Mike to jump in here?
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in a little bit, but I'm going to then defer to Adam to tell you about particularly what we did in the last month, really. Well, October, we're now in December, because I think that's a great example. I do think one place we can all start, and we have started here now in Logitech, is making sure that we do drive the data and we're very transparent. We're transparent with our representation data in our sustainability report. And being transparent holds you accountable. And we're talking a lot about accountability. So when we use our data, we are trying to be intersectional about that. We're looking at race, ethnicity, and gender when we dig into our population, and we see how we're hiring, how we're promoting, how we're paying, what level people are in the organization. And if you take a very singular focus, if you just take gender, it doesn't tell the whole story and the whole experience, as Adam just quite rightly pointed out about the intersectionality of somebody who is Black, Islam, lesbian. You can't see that when you look at one slice of data. So we are doing that as a very true baseline. It's not enough though, because you can't collect all of the data in different countries everywhere. You can't collect the data about different aspects of intersectionality. And there's so much stigma out there sometimes that people aren't even willing to declare that data. So I think about veterans in the US. It's a piece of identity where people are asked if they will disclose that. They very often don't disclose it because of the stigma that US veterans must have PTSD and would therefore be a problem in the workplace. So data is a baseline, but there's so much more that we can do. And I would echo what Tracy was saying. What we can do is have dialogue and understanding. So there's really two focus areas for Logitech. One is making sure we have a psychologically safe environment where actually people can feel there is no risk, there is no penalty about talking about my full identity. And then it's starting and ensuring that people have courageous conversations all the way through ERGs to leaders who are being vulnerable and open. And Maria, I'll stop there because Adam can bring that to life through our Diversity Month and what we have been doing and what we're about to do.
Thank you, Kirsty. To build on that then, I'll just add one bullet point, which is really just about my personal experience. And that's what I mentioned before about my invisible disability. And as tomorrow is International Day of Persons with a Disability, I wanted to reference this explicitly, that there is a lot of stigma that exists in society about invisible disabilities and perceived individual disabilities, like being a veteran and PTSD, as mentioned by Kirsty. And that impacts me not only at a societal level, but also sometimes at work. It doesn't at Logitech, but has definitely in my career in the past. So that's at a personal level. To build on what Kirsty was saying at a Logitech level, the two parts there that we were really looking at was one, psychological safety. Can you bring your full self to work, whomever you are, whatever your gender is, whatever your intersectionality is, can you be yourself? Full stop. That's psychological safety. And whether or not you feel that you can speak up in meetings to make mistakes, or just be yourself and ask the questions that you think people might not be able to answer, that's psychological safety, the ability to be yourself in meetings and to speak up. But that also means you can bring your whole self to work as whomever you are. So that's one part I would answer and build on to what Kirsty's mentioned about psychological safety. The other part was what we delivered for Diversity Month. And I put the link into the chat window for everyone here at Logitech. I apologize to Tracy that you can't see the intranet, but essentially what we would state is that our diversity approach is always intersectional. Exactly as described by Tracy, that we ensure that our diversity dimensions and EIGs would have conversations together, and they can be challenging. It can be difficult, and for leaders, it can be this case of being vulnerable to perhaps not be able to have the conversation that you're aware of doing or how to do so. We piloted something called the Human Library back in October.
Which was amazing.
Which was amazing. I'll explain just in 1 minute what the Human Library is. Imagine you go to a library and you would read a book about any topic. For example, intersectionality. You can ask the book any question. You can learn anything you like. But if it's a human being, sometimes that's a bit more difficult. So we're readers as we look and speak to books. Imagine if that book was a person. As someone would come up onto the screen with 4 people in a room with leaders and employees to say, I happen to be a female, but I'm also ADHD and I'm also a lesbian. And then you have half an hour with that individual to have the conversation with that person that you might not never have had before. And that's a pilot we've rolled out, and we did in October and was hugely successful. And we're now looking at how can we expand on that principle and be vulnerable to practice these skills and to be intersectional. And if you'd like to learn more, please have a look at the link that I put into the chat window.
Adam, don't be surprised if I don't reach out to you to learn more and still that good, what you did for Oracle. That sounds amazing.
And Tracy, it is truly amazing, and they're so oversubscribed, just trying to get the Human Library, which is a sign in itself that people are interested in learning more and being open, and that people have questions to ask and they want a safe place to ask those questions.
Well, that's it. It's the safe place where individuals feel like, I can ask the question without being penalized, ask the question without being thought, well, God, why would you ask them that? I love that idea. What a great thing to do.
Be very happy to share with Oracle as well as everyone further, of course, at Logitech. And we're also thinking about, they're about to go online with 1,000 books, the people, and we're considering donating our webcams to all of the books as a donation from Logitech and be a partner. So more of that to come. Sorry, there was a question. I heard.
I think the Human Library is just amazing, and it reminds me of what Nicolaus was telling us. It's through experience. It's not just going into schools or into a classroom and learning about the topic, but rather how can we relate to the experience? How can we go beyond the traditional methods and the traditional ways we know of teaching and learning and creating meaningful experiences, because once you experience something, no one can tell you anything about it. It's so powerful. So thank you for sharing that. And I love that you mentioned psychological safety, because one of the things we talk a lot about here at Vital Voices is being an authentic leader. And many people ask me, and ask a lot of mentors in our network, how can I become an authentic leader? What should I do? What are the first steps? And in fact, it wasn't too long ago, maybe 2 months ago, that I heard a participant of one of our programs that was saying, I want to grow a company, but I don't feel I can show every aspect of myself, because maybe I tend to laugh too much, or I joke with the other team plays. So I think this is something really strong and powerful. And I wanted to ask you, how can leaders engage in this? How can leaders can create psychological safety for their own teams, for their companies, and thinking at a broader level to our communities?
Where do we start? I would say, I think it is hugely important that leaders do be vulnerable. And it is, so leadership is challenging, but you also get paid the big bucks for it, seemingly. And it's your role to be vulnerable and show that vulnerability for others to share. And again, Adam can say more. We recently had a session throughout the US where actually COVID and this ability to be on Zoom actually worked in people's favor, because while talking about some fairly difficult topics for people where you do have to be vulnerable, almost being like a radio host. So there was a facilitator and you on your Zoom without video. It was amazing how open and vulnerable leaders could be about sharing their experiences and their own identity. Adam, I don't know if you want to expand.
I think that's a brilliant explanation already, Kirsty. And as I know we're almost at time, perhaps I would ask for Tracy to add anything. I can expand, Kirsty, but Tracy, is there anything you would like to share?
And I will keep it very brief. I will say this, that it really does start with the leader. How open and honest is the leader? Are they providing a forum where employees feel comfortable with sharing? Are they actively thinking about their team at all times? Are they making sure that all voices are heard in meetings? Are they pulling and not only think about gender, we talked about disabilities, but the introvert versus the extroverts. Are we making sure that we're giving stretch assignments to those who may not be as vocal, but they're just as strong and active and dependable worker? Those are all the things that build that psychological safety, that builds that confidence in the leader, that individuals can be more open, bring their full self, be authentic when they see a leader that's showing up in that way. So I said that in 1 minute, so I could throw it back to you, Adam.
I think that was brilliant. At time, though, I will go back to our wonderful hosts here. Is there anything else that I can finalize or conclude on as we end this panel?
Well, thank you very much for all your questions. And definitely what we talk about here at Vital Voices is first, knowing yourself. That's something you've been mentioning for a long time. And secondly, as a leader, I think of the sweatshirt that Alice Nelson was wearing today, use your power to empower. I'd say use your power to empower yourself at first, to show your full self, and then use that power to empower others and making sure they feel safe and they feel treasured wherever they are, and they can fully show everything they have to give to us. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. It has been wonderful talking to you, listening to you, and I definitely have more questions than answers right now because my mind is going everywhere. So I'd like to thank you because what we try to do at our annual summit is start conversations. And I'm sure that from this conversation, we will have a lot of different conversations in 2022. So thank you very much for inspiring us, making us think, and making us feel part of the change.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us and inviting us.
Absolutely.
Gracias to everyone. Thank you.
Qué interesante esta conversación, qué inspirador. No
This
sé, del otro lado-
conversation has been interesting, exciting, inspiring. I don't know about you, but it gives me a lot of hope, particularly knowing that companies in the IT business and other industries are seriously tackling this conversation, taking this 360 view. The three panelists have talked about bringing our own selves to work. Leave nothing outside. So being able to freely express yourself and continue building this kind of culture. We have been talking about culture, intersectionality, and now we will address another dimension that probably resonates with us all. How can we create an inclusive environment to embrace the different generations? We are talking about intergenerational relations. I will invite the treasurer of Vital Voices, South Cone, Andrea. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. Martina, I turn it over to you as moderator. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. For this panel, we will have some guest speakers who will talk about this, but let me share the purpose that we have around this topic. When we talk about intersectionality, there are many sides to it. We have generations, intergenerational considerations. It is a cross-cutting topic for both men and women, intersectionality and generations have an impact on all of us during our careers. So at Vital Voices, we believe that generations are an important consideration. We want to create an impact so that organizations will consider this topic of generation. I will ask Sofia to join the conversation. I am asking Sofia Codron to join us. She's from Unilever. Let me introduce Sofia. She's Human Resources Consulting Manager at Unilever. She develops new programs for cultural and work diversity. She has been working in human resources for many years, and her purpose is to help other people make things happen and to leave an imprint. And that is her purpose at work. Good morning. How are you, Sophie? Good morning, and thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So, the goal is to talk about intergenerational or cross-generational teams. This is one of the challenges for leaders. How can you handle this? How can you make teams with members from different generations work? This is one of the main opportunities we have at this time because organizations have colleagues from different generations. You have baby boomers who are in the leading positions, and we also have Gen X, we have millennials. So I believe you're around that range. And the ones, the Z, Generation Z members from this century. So I believe that baby boomers are the ones closer to retirement now. They are close to retire from the workplace. And sometimes they are referred to as the invisible, excluded members of society because they are leaving the workplace with all it entails from the point of view of revenue generation and feeling useful, feeling well, and feeling that one can make a contribution to society. I don't know if you have watched the movie with Anne Hathaway and Robert De Niro. He is her trainee. She is a much younger leader, and the millennials who are his colleagues look at him as if he were some strange phenomenon. However, he can share his experience, and at the end, they value his experience, and they understand that this person is not disposable. The name of the movie is The Intern. So can you please share with us your program, the program that you launched, that gives people the opportunity to go back to the workplace? The name of the program is See Centennials. So can you please tell us a bit about this program? Thank you very much. See Centennials is a project at one of the Unilever divisions. They had the need to develop market research for a new product category. At Unilever, we no longer ask how many people are needed for a position. We focus on the skills required by a certain project. This brings a paradigmatic change at the talent level. It gives you the possibility to have a much broader and diverse ecosystem. And this is where the Centennial Initiative came up. And it tore down the recruitment stereotypes. We are not only focusing on junior professionals or young graduates. It is the first time that we have a program for this age band. There are millions of people that have to be part of the ecosystem, digital ecosystem. They are older than 60, and they are kind of at the end of their career, and they find many limitations. However, we believe that this generation has a lot of experience, and that's why we are after the six centennials, the people in their 60s. When we launched this campaign, there were more than 2,400 candidates. This reaffirms the need in the market and the popularity of this kind of program. I have one question. Those applicants included both men and women. Yes, men and women. I believe this is a cross-cutting characteristic for society. At Vital Voices, we are interested in women's leadership, but this is a characteristic that is common to all. Yes, of course. 4 weeks ago, the six centennials joined the company, and for this project in particular, and they will be making their presentation to the business, and they will be telling business leaders whether it is convenient or not for us to join this market segment. We also have a partnership with SEMA University, a prestigious university in Argentina focused on business training. And they are also developing a senior citizen or senior professional program on digital transformation, data analytics, consumer experience, in order to continue building their skills, upskilling and reskilling these people. So this breaks down the paradigm of bias that indicates that people, when they are not digital natives and they have certain age group, cannot join the workforce. But your project demonstrates quite the opposite. With the pandemic, additionally, it has been demonstrated that everybody was required to connect with technology in order to keep in touch with the rest of the world. So technology is quite friendly. So the perspective of your company is that that was not a barrier. It was a way to enable further training. Yes, the requirement is that they should be able to use a cell phone. But we were surprised because they are very good at using technology and they are very well prepared. And we were also amazed to see how good they are when they have to handle LinkedIn accounts. They are very active on LinkedIn. They are looking for opportunities. They share interesting materials for others to see. So it was a bias that we had. And it was demonstrated otherwise with reality. Now, the world is changing fast, and we all have to keep on learning. It doesn't matter whether you're 30, 40, 50, or 60. We all have to jump on board this technological change. And it is a matter of being eager to learn or willing to learn. So this myth was debunked. Now, there is an important point. The life expectancy is now longer than 30 or 40 years ago. And we continue to have numbers. Well, you focused on 60-year-old people, but now there are also 50-year-old people who, if they lose a job, they find it's very hard for them to find another job. There is always an age limit in the eligibility requirements. Sometimes people who are 50 years old do not qualify or are not eligible. So to broaden this age range based on the life expectancy, a 60-year-old today can be super active and they can be super capable. So someone who is 60 today may be equivalent to someone who was 80, 30 or 40 years ago. So sometimes they are kind of invisibly excluded. Nobody talks about it. So it's been kudos to your company because it's been a great idea for you to make this problem visible. How did you promote this campaign, trying to use a language that would appeal to them? So this different language, these different generations, how did they coexist within the organization? What was the challenge like for leaders having these teams with sexennials and millennials? Well, for our company, it's a challenge. And our goal is that leaders and team members should feel supported in order to deal with the different generations and have actual diversity in our culture. That is our purpose. In human resources, we provide support so that no one will feel excluded. As regards sexennials, we have to make sure they are part of the company. They feel part of the company, this feeling of belonging, the fact that they can contribute ideas, that they can have cross-training or exchange ideas with younger people so that anyone would make their own contribution based on their own experience. I believe there are many, many benefits associated with this kind of model. Unilever is a mass consumer company. Its products are consumed by different generations. Our consumers cover a wide range. So having diversity inside our company, in our talent, helps us connect better with consumers and engage with consumers who are diverse. Today, we are talking about generational diversity, but diversity in all spheres is important to us. That is why we consider the diversity of our consumers. It helps us have different points of view that makes our company better, and this helps our business do better as well and create better products. So I believe it is fundamental. Well, you have said that this has to do with making good business sense. You also talked about diverse culture, and I believe this is fundamental. this topic should be brought to the table frequently, because gender diversity, for instance, is something that is being discussed. A lot is being said about that. We don't need to justify why we are talking about gender diversity, but generational diversity is quite a new topic. So to create change in the short term, I believe we have to give visibility to examples like the one you have mentioned. These are opportunities for work teams to improve, recognizing the experience of people that bring benefits for the company. So leaders at Vital Voices, we need to encourage leaders to consider this, to put it on their agenda, to take the Unilever case as an example. I'm sure there will be other companies who are taking this kind of initiative, but to put it on the agenda, this age issue, having diverse teams in all respects. So I'm going to ask you to share a brief conclusion about being a leader of human capital, leading a project such as this one, and the impact it has had with the different stakeholders and for the different people that were included. It has been, I can imagine it was a great joy.
Yes, absolutely. I encourage companies and leaders and everyone who's listening to us to incorporate generational diversity in their companies, because it's going to be really very powerful from all perspectives. To all the people listening to us, if they feel that because of their age they're out of the labor market, I also urge you to seek these spaces, to apply, to dare to apply to these positions, and to be able to show everything you have to contribute. The C-centennials that have joined our company have a great track record, which is a great asset. So that's my invitation and my message to you all. Sophie, thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts with us, and I hope that the message has been hammered home. Older generations need to be included in companies. They need to have the opportunity to be able to continue contributing to the experience. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sophia. It's been incredible. I had the chance and the fortune to talk to those C-centennials, and it's been really amazing. Those intersections, collaborating, working together has been great. And this is also proof of the wealth. We are reaching the end of this meeting. We have still something else for you. Thank you for your comments and questions. There's a lot going on and resonating in connection with this concept, which is new to many. We have heard about bias. We are trying to make them conscious, but there's much more to think about the different dimensions intersecting with the others and with our own selves. I will call Maria to have a formal closing of this great event. Thank you. Welcome again. Tell us what your thoughts are about this reflection, about this meeting, sorry. Yes, it's been an amazing conference, and closing the gaps through technology has also been really impressive. We have reached the end of this 13th annual conference. I would like to thank everyone for having participated, our sponsors, allies, and benefactors, and special recognition to Logitech teams who have supported us in the conference. They have provided us with all the tools, all the technological tools to make these streams possible. So we encourage you to have a different view in order to have a more comprehensive and inclusive approach to intersectionality in order to develop equality of opportunities. We know that the history of women is different from one to the other, and that's why we need to make this effort of looking, understanding, listening, and acting, designing customized opportunities for each one. understanding their characteristics as well as their differences. Intersectionality requires listening, examining our own privileges, and asking ourselves who could be excluded or affected adversely because of our work or context. Likewise, it entails taking measurable actions in order to include centralized voices and the work of marginalized individuals. This is extremely important. Ultimately, it has to do with evolving as leaders on a daily basis. Just like people evolve, so does our organization. It's been a great year of learning and growth for Vital Voices, thanks to the support of our board, thanks to the team who supports us in each and every action. Thank you so much. And finally, I'd like to thank our women who are vital to our organization, mentors, outstanding women members of the network who join our network on a yearly basis, contributing time and experience to support emerging leaders. At Vital Voices, we say we use power to empower, and we invest in women to transform the world. Let's continue doing this together. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maria Laura. And we are ready to say goodbye. We thank you for being there. We invite you once again to use your voice. Grab your phones. This is the QR code for you to see what your takeaways are. What are the words that resonate in you? And this is how we're going to be closing together this 13th conference of Vital Voices SouthernCon. We have brought a new concept to our conversation. We believe that many of you will leave inspired. We take away many questions on how we can have greater convergence of our different dimensions. Thank you for having been protagonists of this great conference, and I hope to meet you again here next year. Until then.
En portugués no te